Imagine taking the keys to your life, your career, literally your entire empire, and just handing them straight over to your absolute best friend. You've saved each other, you trust each other implicitly, and you feel absolutely certain that your bond is unbreakable. Well, according to history, you have just made the most dangerous mistake of your life.
Sounds totally counterintuitive, doesn't it? But as Voltaire famously noted, "Lord, protect me from my friends, I can take care of my enemies." It turns out the people closest to us often pose the biggest hidden threat. So let's dive into exactly why the simple act of trusting a friend can completely lead to your downfall, and why, strangely enough, an enemy might actually be the most loyal ally you could ever ask for.
Part 1. The Friend's Betrayal. Michael's Story.
Picture this. It's the mid-9th century AD, and the Byzantine Empire is being ruled by a young, completely inexperienced emperor named Michael III. He's suddenly thrust into power, surrounded by murderers and political intriguers, and he's just desperate for someone he can actually trust. So, Michael ignores the advice of his counselors, who, by the way, highly recommended a qualified guy named Bardas. Instead, Michael elevates his best friend, a peasant stable-boy named Basilius. Now, Basilius had zero government experience, but he had saved Michael's life a few years prior. Michael figured, hey, a man who owes me everything will be loyal forever, right? Well, the sheer speed and audacity of what happened next is frankly chilling. Michael immediately bumps Basilius up from horse trainer to head of the stables, then all the way to chamberlain and chief counselor. He doubles, then triples his salary, ennobles him, and even marries him off to his own mistress. But all this immense wealth just made Basilius hopelessly greedy. He actually convinces Michael that his uncle, Bardas, the guy who should have had the job in the first place, was conspiring against him. Michael agrees to have his uncle murdered, and Basilius literally stabs Bardas to death right in the middle of a crowd. Shortly after that, Basilius asks to replace Bardas as head of the army, and Michael, totally blinded by friendship, just hands it over.
And that blind trust led directly to the ultimate betrayal. A few years later, Michael is facing some financial trouble and asks Basilius to just pay back some of the money he had borrowed. To Michael's absolute shock, Basilius refuses with a look of pure impudence. It was only in that exact moment that Michael realized his deadly mistake. This former stable boy now had more money and more allies in the army than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, Michael woke up surrounded by soldiers. Basilius just stood there and watched as they stabbed his best friend to death, proclaimed himself emperor, and then paraded Michael's head through the streets on the end of a long pike.
So Michael staked his entire life on the sense of gratitude he just assumed his friend must feel, and instead he created a monster who felt entirely entitled to his success. If relying on friends gets you ahead on a pike, what on earth is the alternative? Well, for that, we look to the brilliant strategy of Emperor Sung of China.
Part 2. The Emperor's Wisdom. Taming Enemies.
In AD 959, General Chao Kuang-yin became Emperor Song, stepping onto the dragon throne only to face a really terrifying historical precedent. You see, for centuries, the Chinese military had followed this incredibly bloody pattern. A strong general would murder the weak emperor, take the throne, and then immediately murder his fellow generals just to ensure his own survival. Sung knew the odds were high that he'd be murdered within a year or two. He had to break the cycle, and he executed this brilliant survival plan without shedding a single drop of blood. First, he throws a massive banquet to celebrate the new dynasty and invites the most powerful commanders, basically his friends in the army. After they had downed a lot of wine, he dismisses the guards. He looks at these fearsome generals and just honestly confesses that he spends his days in total fear, unhappy at the table and in his bed. He points out that any of their subordinates could force a rebellion at any moment. Then he offers them the ultimate trade: fine estates, beautiful dwellings, and immense riches if they would simply give up their commands and retire in peace. Astonished, the generals tendered their resignations the very next day. Just like that, Song turned a pack of friendly wolves into docile lambs.
But Song didn't just neutralize his friends, he actively recruited his enemies. Take King Liu of the Southern Han, for example, who finally surrendered after years of open rebellion. Song invites him to the palace and offers him a glass of wine. Liu, absolutely terrified it was poisoned, begs for his life and refuses to drink. Emperor Song just laughs, takes the glass, and swallows it himself. There was no poison. From then on, Liu became his most trusted friend. In another instance, Song defeated King Chen Shu. Song's ministers bring him documents proving Chen Shu was actually still conspiring to kill him. But instead of executing him, Song hands the defeated king a package. When Chen Shu opens it, he finds his very own conspiracy documents. Song knew all about the plot but spared him anyway. This shocking generosity won the king over completely, making him one of Song's most incredibly loyal vassals. This elegantly illustrates the core principle we're digging into in this explainer, clearly stated here in the source material. Never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. Emperor Song used this exact law to break an endless cycle of violence and establish a dynasty that ruled China for over 300 years. But to truly grasp why this works so consistently across history, we really need to look beneath the surface of the events.
Part 3. Keys to Power and Psychology.
So why exactly are friends so dangerous in positions of power, and why enemies so immensely useful? Look, it is completely natural to want to employ your friends when you find yourself in times of need. The world is a harsh place, and familiar faces kind of soften that harshness. But bringing friendship into the realm of power disrupts a very, very delicate balance. The core problem is that you often don't know your friends nearly as well as you imagine you do. Friends naturally agree on things just to avoid arguments, right? They cover up their unpleasant qualities. When you hire a friend, the act of kindness unbalances everything. People fundamentally want to feel like they deserve their good fortune, so the receipt of a massive favor can actually feel pretty oppressive because it implies you chose them because of your personal relationship, not necessarily their merit, and this breeds a secret condescension. The injury comes out slowly, just these hidden little flashes of resentment and envy. Before you know it, the friendship fades, and the more favors you supply, the less gratitude you actually receive.
An entitled friend completely forgets the favors they've received and starts to imagine they earned their success strictly on their own merits, just like Basilius did. On the flip side, an enemy expects absolutely nothing and gets everything. I mean, a man suddenly spared the guillotine is an incredibly grateful man indeed. He has everything to prove, and he will literally go to the ends of the earth for the person who pardoned him. Your enemies are an untapped gold mine that you really must learn to exploit.
And the historical proof of this is just staggering. When Napoleon's foreign minister Talleyrand decided his boss was leading France to total ruin, he didn't turn to a buddy to conspire. No, he chose his most hated enemy, Joseph Fouché, the head of the secret police. He knew their alliance would be based entirely on mutual self-interest, completely uncontaminated by messy personal feelings. Or look at Henry Kissinger back in 1971. When he discovered a plot by anti-war activists to kidnap him, he secretly invited his alleged kidnappers to a Saturday morning meeting, completely charmed them, and actually remained friends with one of them for years. Even Mao Zedong used his enemies to his advantage, literally utilizing the Japanese invasion of China to give his communist forces the combat experience they desperately needed to later defeat the nationalists. The truth is, without enemies around us, we grow lazy. An enemy at our heels sharpens our wits.
Part 4. When do we use friends?
Now, you might be wondering, is there ever a time when a friend is actually more useful than an enemy in the realm of power? The answer is yes, but it requires an incredibly cold and calculating approach to the friendship. This brings us to what the source text calls the reversal. A person in power often has dirty work that needs to get done, and for the sake of appearances, it's generally way better to have other people do it. Friends often do this best because their affection makes them willing to take chances for you. But stepping into even darker territory, kings and sovereigns historically used friends as convenient scapegoats. This is famously known as the fall of the favorite. If a grand plan goes disastrously wrong, a leader will let their closest friend at court take the fall, simply because the public would never believe a leader would deliberately sacrifice their closest companion. Of course, playing that card means losing the friend forever.
We're going to wrap up today's explainer with a really profound thought from Abraham Lincoln. Delivered right at the height of the Civil War, Lincoln was actually being chastised for referring to Southerners as fellow human beings in error, rather than as irreconcilable monsters. His response was brilliantly simple. Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends? It leaves us with an incredibly powerful question for our own lives. Are you foolishly relying on the fragile, easily bruised egos of friends who might secretly resent your favors? Or are you strategically looking at your adversaries, finding the mutual self-interest, and transforming your enemies into your sharpest, most loyal assets? The choice, and the power that comes with it, is entirely yours.